Hey folks, Ren here. Just a quick message before we get started with today's episode. We're already hard at work with Season 2 of Spines, but we can't make it happen without your help. If you've enjoyed Season 1 so far and you can spare $1 or $2 a month, please go to patreon.com/Spines Podcast and help us pay for the podcast hosting costs we'll need to cover for our next season. We really, really appreciate it. Okay, that's enough talk about the money stuff. Now, please enjoy Spines Episode 7, Queen of the Cyborgs. When I started this, I never thought I'd have to issue a PSA. The messages were just supposed to be for you, Zachary. But I guess other people listen to these messages, so I feel like I should warn them about something. Here it is. The 6th Avenue Historic District is now closed to the public. It has been transformed into a commune of cyborgs who don't care much for us old-fashioned flesh and blood types. There, you've all been warned. This is Spines. Okay, I'll admit it. Sage won this round. But in my defense, she did have a lot of other people on her side, even if I am using the word people pretty loosely here. Let me explain what happened, and hopefully it'll convince everyone to stay the hell away from 6th Avenue. I had no idea where to find Sage, and from that email she sent a while back, I decided she was too mad for it to be worth it for me to try to track her down. But then I got an email from a city cop. Apparently, the cops started listening to these messages after encountering some of the weirdness our friends have been leaving around town. Anyway, this one cop, he couldn't find my phone number or my address, so he finally just got in touch by email. I assumed it was just a prank, so I didn't respond. I mean, everyone knows cops don't email people they want to interview, right? What's next, tweeting my Miranda rights at me? But as it turns out, they actually do use email when they need to. At least this one detective does. I'm gonna call him Detective Kiyoma, since I was watching Steins Gate just before I got his email. Yeah, I watch a lot of anime. Sue me. Anyway, Detective Kiyoma tried to get me to meet with him, but I'm pretty sure I've been in trouble with the law before. Before the attic, I mean. And most of what I do now is illegal, so I said I'd pass. Eventually, he gave up on getting me to meet with him in person, but he asked if I knew anything, if I could email him anything about weird new body modification around town, stuff involving metal. The thing about metal made it pretty clear that this wasn't about Natalie's kids, so I went out to see what I could find. At first, I didn't see anything weirder than usual on the streets, so I started asking around tattoo parlors. It took a while to get anyone to talk, but eventually I started hearing about 6th Avenue. People would mention it, and then they'd follow up with, "Oh, but you don't want to go there." But since when do I listen to reason? When I got to 6th Avenue, I started to notice people looking different. Lots of metal rings and studs in places you don't usually see, like the elbows and between the fingers. Still, if you spend enough time downtown, you'll see stuff like that eventually. But then I got to the main part of 6th Avenue. It's an old shopping street with hipster bars and sushi restaurants and boutiques. But now the hipsters and yuppies were nowhere to be seen. Now everybody on the street was covered in rings and studs and body art, and they all seemed to be dressed up for a steampunk convention or something. I noticed one guy in particular. He wore a top hat and a tweed waistcoat, and he had his mustache waxed into this big twirly shape. But he also had what looked like gold wires coming out of his ear and then disappearing back into his scalp, just above the hairline. When he turned, I saw he also had a big clockwork piece where his right eye should have been. "Can I help you?" he asked. His teeth were metal, too. I told him I was just wondering where he got that stuff done. He laughed and said, "If you don't know already, my dear, then you don't want to know. Also, I'm with the Neighborhood Watch Association, so I'm going to have to ask you to move along." Just on a hunch, I said, "Is it Sage? Is she the one who does this?" He instantly looked suspicious and asked me how I knew that name. I told him Sage and I were old friends. He said he doubted that very much, but he'd take me to see her. So I followed him down the street. There were more people like him posted at intersections, I guess to keep out the insufficiently metallic. He took me to a building I recognized, but had never been inside, as far as I knew. It was an old movie theater, the kind that only plays classics in foreign films. The man with the clockwork piece in his eye walked right past the usher like he owned the place. I followed close behind him, and that's when I saw the Cyborgs. A memory from before the attic. I'm in bed, lying next to a sleeping woman. She's naked and curled on her side. It's dim, but there's enough light coming through the window for me to make out her features. In this memory, her nose is crooked, and it really bothers me. That's strange because I don't think it would bother me now. Apparently, I used to be a lot shallower than I am now, because in this memory, her nose is driving me crazy. I reach out, and I nudge the little bump on the side of her nose with my index finger. I push the bridge into a shape I like. Pinch her nose so it isn't so long. Her flesh doesn't spring back the way it should. Instead, it does what I tell it to do, reshaping under my fingers like putty. The woman stays asleep through all of this. After a while, though, she opens her eyes and gets up and walks to the bathroom. I hear the moment when she looks into the mirror and screams. I don't know if they actually call themselves cyborgs. I suspect not. But that's the only word I can think of to describe them. They were all stretched out in the old seats of this theater, talking and laughing like they were waiting for a movie to start. But all of them were more metal than flesh. One woman's arms ended at the shoulder, replaced by bundles of gold and silver cords that twitched and moved around. Another guy was pretty much just a human face set into the side of a metal keg. Another person had a vaguely human shape, but she was covered by 2-foot-long metal feathers on every inch of her skin. Some of them spoke in human voices, but a couple clicked and hissed through metal speakers. All of them wore Victorian-style clothes, lots of corsets and lace, even though some of those clothes had been modified to fit non-human forms. They all greeted my tour guide in one way or another, some by waving, others by flashing some lights or making an R2-D2 sound. He pointed at me. "She says she knows Sage," he said, "wants to talk to her." "She'll have to wait," the feathered woman said. "The show's about to start." The tour guide nodded and gestured for me to sit down. I sat, but I picked a place as far away from the others as I could get. The show started a minute or two later. Oh, Zachary, I wished you could have seen it. Or maybe you did. I don't know what you did while you were here. It started off with Sage just kneeling on the bare boards of the stage. She wore a thin leotard, and at first I didn't think she had any modifications at all. Then she lifted her arms, and copper flowed like ribbons from her fingertips and up into the air. She got up and started dancing. The whole time, the copper streamers swayed and flowed around her, like kelp floating in water. Sometimes she froze, but the streamers stayed up in the air. Then she would move again, and the copper ribbons would be like cloth in the breeze. I was so focused on that beautiful dance that I didn't pay attention when someone sat down in the seat behind me. But then someone leaned forward and whispered in my ear. "Your new message, Zachary, delivered right on schedule." A girl whispered, "Zachary says, I'll ask you one more time. Please leave the city. I'll find you." I turned around. The girl was small, dark-haired, with metal plates covering her arms and neck. I asked if she knew where you were. "No," the girl said. "He came in here once, and I don't think he'll be back." She looked at Sage when she said that, and I got the sense she was a little scared. I don't really need to tell you my response to this latest message, do I, Zachary? Sage finished her dance, and all the cyborgs went wild. She took a bow, and the copper ribbons withdrew back into her fingertips. She stepped down from the stage. As she walked, a thin sheet of silver poured out from beneath her collarbones, forming a corset and a long skirt, a beautiful Victorian dress. The cyborgs gathered around her like a bunch of groupies, and she spent some time talking to them and letting them fawn all over her. Then she spotted me. "Oh, it's you," she said, and I think she hated me even more than Natalie did. I asked her if we could talk. She said, "I have nothing to say to you, but I do want to show you something." I followed her out of the auditorium and down a hallway to an area that was probably a concession stand one time. I noticed things about her as we walked. I was wrong about the lack of modifications. They were hard to see from a distance, but up close you couldn't miss them. I thought she had a head of long blonde hair, but really she just had countless gold filaments that passed for hair at a first glance. Up close you could see it didn't move the way hair should. Her eyes seemed like regular blue eyes from far away, until you got close enough to see that her irises were faceted like gems. And her skin, I don't know what material it was, but it was way too smooth and shiny to be real human skin. A bunch of people waited in line outside the converted concession stand. Inside there was a chair, the kind you see in dentists' offices. Sage called out, "Next," and the first person in line got into the chair. She asked him what he wanted. He said he wanted wings that could retract into his shoulders, wings with razor-sharp edges. Sage nodded like that was the most normal request in the world. Then she opened a big trunk next to the dentist chair and pulled out a chunk of rusted scrap metal. I asked Sage why she didn't want to talk to me. She responded without looking at me. "You and Zachary and the Skullman are on one side. I'm on the other. That's all." As she spoke, she massaged the metal. It bent and folded and melted under her hands. I told her I wasn't on the Skullman's side. I don't remember much, but I know that. Sage finished shaping the metal into a long wing shape, pinching one side down into a fine edge. She said, "You are on his side, whether you know it or not. You're with him and the rest of the splinter. You have to be." She motioned for the guy in the chair to turn over, and then she held the metal wing against his back. Little metal threads snaked out from the wing and into the guy's skin. Soon those threads pulled the wing into the guy's back, and Sage set about making another. The whole time, the guy just dozed like he was getting a massage. I asked her what the splinter was. She just shook her head. The more you know, the more dangerous you are to me. I'd kill you, except I don't know what happens when you die. I don't want to risk it. She glared at me. Natalie was impulsive. She should have known it was too risky, trying to kill you. I asked her what she thought I could do, why I was a threat. She looked at me like I was stupid. You can take the rest, that's what you can do. And then her expression softened, and for a moment it was like she pitied me. The same as with Jose. It's not your fault, she said. You can't help it. But it doesn't matter whether you mean to be dangerous or not. You're like a rabid animal. That stung, I admit. Finally, I asked her why she was talking to me, if that was the case. Sage finished working on the second wing and attached it to the guy's back. Her mouth worked for a moment, like she had something stuck in her teeth. Then she coughed and spat up a yellow gem. She pushed it into the guy's back, between his two wings, watching me the whole time. She said, I wanted you to see what you'll be up against if you come after us. And I want you to put this in one of your little messages, so the splinter knows it too. She turned to the entourage. Show her. And then, in the blink of an eye, one of the cyborgs had a hand around my throat and was lifting me off the ground. I kicked and punched, but it was like he didn't even feel it. Then I reached out and did the thing I did before when I was trying to get away from Natalie's fighters. I slowed time to a crawl and wriggled out of the guy's grip. And then I immediately got punched in the face by one of the women standing next to him. See, these were people whose movements came from CPUs planted into their skulls. Metal cables woven into their muscle fibers, unbreakable tendons. Even slowed down to a fraction of normal time, they were faster than me. One of them slapped me, and I was surprised it didn't take my head clean off. My ears were still ringing. They kept hitting me. It was probably only for a minute or so, but it felt like longer. That's enough, Sage said at last. Then, to me, she said, Tell the splinter. Tell them it's not worth it to come after us. And then, even through her tough Queen of the Cyborgs routine, I saw how scared she was. Her entourage stepped aside, and I limped away without another word. So that was my day. I got my ass kicked by a bunch of steampunk freaks. Since I don't remember being in high school, I guess this is going to count as my most embarrassing moment for a while. If anyone from this splinter is listening, I'd recommend taking Sage's advice. Don't mess with her. I don't remember much, but I know Sage is wrong about me and the Skull Man. I know we weren't ever on the same side. We couldn't be. And you, Zachary, I don't believe you were ever on his side either. At least, I really don't want to believe that. But I don't know about this splinter, if it's a person or a group, if it's allied with the Skull Man or it's different. I just don't know. So, how about it, world? Anyone out there know the splinter? If so, do me a solid, let me know. Let's talk. Spines is a production of Zoom Doom Stories. It's narrated by Ren Jones, written by Jamie Killen, website and logos by Benjamin Pond, produced by Jamie Killen and Benjamin Pond. You can support Spines by visiting patreon.com/Spines Podcast and by subscribing and leaving a review on iTunes.